Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, text 26. I'm sorry, chapter 26, text 33. Right. I'm sure you're not able to see the screen properly, right? Arthashraya tvam shabdasya drashtur lingatvam evacha tanmatratvam cha nabhaso lakshanam kavayo viduhu. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Persons who are learned, and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker, screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. It is very clear herein that as soon as we speak of hearing, there must be a speaker. Without a speaker, there is no question of hearing. That we understand that. We are able to hear because someone's speaking. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge, which is known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is also called Aparusha. Aparusha means not spoken by any person, materially created. So Aparusha, that is the not spoken by a material person, a person in a material body. It is stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hreda. The sound of Brahman or Veda was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma, the original learned man, Adi Kavaye. How did he become learned? Whenever there is learning, there must be a speaker and the process of hearing. But Brahma was the first created being. Who spoke to him? Since no one was there, who was the spiritual master to give knowledge? He was the only living creature. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge was imparted within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramatma. Vedic knowledge is understood to be spoken by the Supreme Lord, and therefore it is free from the defects of material understanding. Material understanding is defective. If we hear something from a conditioned soul, it is full of defects. All material and mundane information is tainted by illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. Because Vedic knowledge was imparted by the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to material creation, it is perfect. If we receive that Vedic knowledge from Brahma in a disciplic succession, then we receive perfect knowledge. So the process of hearing, so there is a speaker, and then for spiritual knowledge, we need to hear from someone who is not defective. We all have defects, as we know. Everyone in a material body, we are in illusion. We think we are the body. And then we commit mistakes. Our senses are imperfect and we have a tendency to cheat others. So whatever knowledge we have is imperfect. The only way we can receive perfect knowledge is when it's spoken by the perfect personality, and that is the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord spoke this knowledge first to Brahma within the heart. The Paramatma within the heart spoke to Brahma. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. That's the first text, first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam of the first canto, 111. If we see, immediately Srila Vyasadeva points out who's the Supreme Lord. He says, Vasudeva is the Supreme Lord. I offer my obeisances unto him. He's the one who spoke the Vedas into the heart of Brahma. Very first verse, Bhagavatam speaks with that, immediately identifying who's the Supreme Lord. So how can we receive this perfect knowledge? When we hear in disciplic succession. We hear in disciplic succession. So what happens is we may be imperfect, but because we are hearing perfect knowledge from the perfect source, that knowledge is perfect. Prabhupada would say that a person, he has to deliver, say, $500 from one place to another. So he perfectly delivers it. He does not take anything from there. He does not add anything. So he's not perfect, but he delivers it perfectly. That's what is needed. So when we are hearing in disciplic succession, we may not be perfect, but we are hearing, we are receiving the perfect knowledge, and we are distributing the perfect knowledge. That is what is important. Every word we hear has a meaning behind it. As soon as we hear the word water, there is a substance, water, behind the word. Similarly, as soon as we hear the word God, there is a meaning to it. If we receive that meaning and explanation of God from God himself, then it is perfect. But if we speculate about the meaning of God, it is imperfect. Yeah, when we say God, and we start thinking, maybe God is like this, maybe God is like that, we have all very good imaginations. All our minds are very fertile. And we think we are all right. Of course, what I think is the correct thing. God should be like that. God must be like that. Yeah, but is God really like that? So how should we understand God? We have to hear from him. He's the one who can easily explain to us who he is, how he is, instead of us imagining how is God. In Bhagavad Gita, which is the science of God, is spoken by the personality of God himself. This is perfect knowledge. Mental speculators or so-called philosophers who are researching what is God, what is actually God, will never understand the nature of God. The science of God has to be understood in disciplic succession from Brahma, who was first instructed about knowledge of God by God himself. We can understand the knowledge of God by hearing Bhagavad Gita from a person authorized in the disciplic succession. So Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he is saying, I am God. He's saying, I'm the supreme. From me, everything is emanating. I'm the source of everything. Eternal, the living entities are eternal. They're my parts and parcels. He's saying, I have a kingdom, the spiritual world, which is ever manifest. He's giving us all this information, because we cannot have information of God and of the spiritual world by our material mind or our material senses. The material mind and material senses are limited only to experience the material, cannot experience the spiritual. So how will we understand? How will we understand about spiritual matters? We have to hear. Only by hearing will we be able to understand. And the stress is given here that hear from the authorized person in disciplic succession. We can see many people say, yes, 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 I know Bhagavad Gita. Yes, yes, yes. Also, many people have written their own Bhagavad Gita. But is it really Bhagavad Gita, or is it their own song? Bhagavad Gita means song of God. Bhagavad, God, Gita, song. So only if we have heard perfectly about God will we be able to understand God, know something about God. We can't fully understand, but to whatever degree we can. And to that degree, we can speak about God. When we speak of seeing, there must be form. By sense perception, the beginning experience is the sky. Sky is the beginning of form, and from the sky, other forms emanate. Therefore, the objects of knowledge and sense perception begin from the sky. So sky, ether, is the most subtle of the 5 material elements. Of the gross elements, sky is the most subtle. So a sky has some sort of a form. We see, that's the sky. We look up and say, yes, that's what the sky looks like. So we are understanding that all forms, everything, the sense perception, knowledge, everything is emanating from the sky. We'll see how gradually, one by one, the other elements are being created. Any comments or any questions?
No.
If no, then Bhutanam chitra dhatratvam bahir antaram evacha pranendriyatma dishnyatvam nabaso vritti lakshanam. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. I'm going to read this again. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. The mind, the senses, and the vital force or living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. So that's the reason it's so important to read the purports by Prabhupada, because sometimes by just reading the translation, we're not able to understand. But by Prabhupada's purports, then he explains it very clearly. Same with Bhagavad Gita. Same with Bhagavad Gita. Many times we will read only the translation, we can get bewildered. But because we are hearing from Prabhupada the purpose, then he explains to us, this is what Krishna means. This is what you need to do. So the mind, the senses, and the vital force or living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye. Okay, we can't see the mind. Living entity, our life air, we can't see. The living entity, the soul, we can't see. We have forms. The senses we can see, but I'm not sure why they're saying the senses. Okay. Oh, because they say that we think the sense is this eye, but it's not truly that. Anyway, let's read more. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, they are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. Wow, this is... Okay. I will need your help also in this. Externally, they are invisible forms of sense objects. Sense objects is sound, form, taste. What is that? Sound, form, taste, and what are the other sense objects? I'm sorry?
Touch.
Touch.
Yeah.
Touch. And?
Smell.
Smell,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Yes. And so they are invisible, right? We can't see the sound, smell, form we can, but anyway, touch, we feel the touch. So form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, they are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. That subtle form exists. Forms exist in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms or photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of the ethereal element. So what we are trying to understand here is that form actually exists in the sky. Because of sky, these forms are there that is invisible actually. Externally, they are invisible forms of sense objects. Subtle form exists in the ether. Ether, that's the sky, has been proven. So the subtle form exists in the sky, and that's how we can see each other through this internet also now. Before it was television or photographs, by which forms of photographs of one place are transmitted to another by the action of the ethereal element. That is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work but it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. The statement in Bhagavad Gita that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. So I don't understand it very clearly. I can just say what I'm trying to understand is that form as we see, the gross form that we can see, but the subtle form is there in the sky. And based on this, that's how we can see things of far away by manipulating, as Prabhupada is giving the example of television. Because the subtle form is there in the sky, that's the reason form from far away can reach us.
Yeah, as
And
you rightly
mentally,
said, the internet. So that's how we can see right now, Zoom,
see
see,
each other.
we can see each
Yes,
other.
yes, yes.
True.
So at least this is what I'm trying to understand from this. It's like very technical, but and he's saying it's the potential of great scientific research work. And then mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. So we know these all subtle. This is all subtle. Everything in the mind, it's all subtle. We can go sitting here, we can reach America in a moment, right?
Yes.
And that's the subtle way we are going, by our thoughts. We are actually going by our subtle. And so similarly, that's the reason here, Prabhupada is saying that what is our thoughts and what's our consciousness, thinking, feeling, willing, at the time of death, that's going to carry us there to our next body, to our next gross body. Yeah, so this is what at least I understand from this. Did you all want to add anything or correct me if I'm wrong or whatever?
That's what they say, na? Thoughts build up, right? Action.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thoughts are important. What thoughts you have in your mind.
Yes. Yes, that's true. And Prabhupada would also say that with our mind, we travel, right? When we think of something, we're traveling with our mind, and then we are seeing the images of what we are traveling. So all that is subtle though.
Right.
Yeah. So all that is subtle. So Kapila Muni is saying that all this forms, the subtle form, exists in the sky. And then from the sky, gradually, more and more gross elements are going to be created. At least this is what
Will
I
it not
understand.
be the same like when we go to sleep? We dream something, right? So whatever we have thought of or we have executed or we have done during our daytime, it comes in your dreams like what do you say, flash picture or something?
Yeah, yes, I was also thinking of that. Dreams, sometimes we think that, but dreams, we are going in there in our subtle body, but because we wake up and the dream is short, we like, oh, whatever. So yes, it's the mind which takes us to those places.
So you activated your mind during the daytime in that direction, so it comes in your dreams, right?
Also, yes, also that's right. Also, yeah.
Because when you say like I understood only this sentence. Externally, there are invisible forms of sense objects. It means you are using your material senses to experience the subtle objects, right? Like you are using your hand to touch.
Yes.
Yes. You're using nose to smell something. So smell is like, what do you say?
Invisible,
Ethereal.
right?
Yeah, invisible, right?
Invisible, yeah.
I understood
That's
only
right.
this. And this photographs, I understood a little bit.
Yeah. So smell is invisible, sound is invisible also.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason is said that the sense objects are also invisible. They are invisible forms of sense objects.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll stop here for today.
Yes.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and joining in. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shilpa Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare